Hello, I'm Shaun Richards of No Yes Man's Economics. What I'd like to look at today, the subject of inflation and how we get told we're better off, but in fact, we're worse off. This has been highlighted by a speech given yesterday by ECB President Christine Lagarde. Now, this is normal stuff for a central banker, whereby they talk of inflation of 2% a year as if it's some sort of holy grail. And this allows them at the minute to apparently justify all sorts of extraordinary policies. For example, in the euro area, they just added 600 billion euros to the amount of quantitative easing they're doing. That's bond buying. That makes the total for that particular plan to be 1.35 trillion euros. So even for these times, that's a larger amount. Now, what does this do? Well, this filters out into what we call asset markets and asset prices. So the first stop is bond markets. What do you think happens when an enormous buyer comes in? The price goes up. Now, because of the feature of the situation in the euro area, what that actually means is a lot of governments are paid to borrow. Germany, virtually all the way along its yield curve. Shorter end, places like France, Austria, the Netherlands, Spain to some extent at times, a little bit as well. So as you can see, big gain for them, governments, that's where we start. This filters out into other markets, for example, equities. The Euro Stoxx 50, for those that follow that, yesterday was 1,000 points higher at one point than the 2385 low on the 19th of March. So again, another clear gain. But you see here, we're starting with governments winning, then people that are long of shares, good for them, but that tends to be the wealthier. What about the ordinary person? Well, they have one more problem. You see, the actual measure of inflation used ignores anything around housing and house prices. So there is a sector for those that rent, but for many people, buying a house or that is a really big deal. And that's completely escaped. According to the ECB itself, around about a third of expenditure for the ordinary person can go in this area. And all they do is pick up rents, which accounts for about 5 or 6%. So as you can see, there's an enormous gap. So when we come back to the inflation figures, we can see that there are issues here. In the response in the euro area, governments gain, those long as shares gain. You've got a house in the end, you might gain. I know there's going to be a drop now, but they're making a desperate effort to get house prices back up again. But you see, for the first time buyer, that's inflation, isn't it? Next comes the fact at the minute that inflation is very difficult to measure. Ordinarily, for a while, people can't go in shops and ask the prices. You can figure out why that was. But they're much wider issues than this. Some prices aren't available at all, so they make them up. Now that is for more normal times as a standard of behaviour, as in you're only missing one or two, not the extraordinary amounts that are being missed there. And then the other factor that comes in is weight. Something that I guess you probably never ever thought about. I don't blame you. But you see, the fall in inflation in the euro area right now was driven by lower oil prices. But if you look at what people are spending, then in April, the amount spent on petrol and diesel for cars was down by nearly a half on a year ago. So you're recording a big fall in inflation on money that people aren't actually spending. I'm sure you can see the problem with that things are very out of kilter. Now, this particular issue is not really that statisticians are doing something wrong. They're applying their rules. It's that the rules are not really applicable to a situation like this. So, as we look forwards, we'll find a familiar pattern. You're told you're better off, you're not, unless you happen to be long on bonds, equities, or housing stock. Thank you.